Hey guys, welcome to Off the Wall. My name is Mike Shea, and today we're going to be talking about the first episode of season 3 of The Orville, now called The Orville New Horizons, on Hulu instead of Fox. This is Seth MacFarlane's Star Trek-esque show that debuted on Fox and ran for 2 seasons, and then is now since moved to Hulu. We're going to be breaking it down, talking about not only the first episode of this season, but just kind of how it ties into the Orville and talking about the show in general. So if you guys are fans of this, great. Sit down and let's talk about the Orville. So season 3 of the Orville, which is now called the Orville New Horizons, at least for this season, has us picking up following the events of the Kalon attack on Earth, which we remember from Identity and Identity Part 2 in season 2. It's not super clear timeline wise how this is planned out. The episode opens with the Orville undergoing a lot of refits and upgrades to the ship at the Earth dockyards in space. And it's almost alluded to as if this is right after the K-Lot incident, which raises some eyebrows because Identity and Identity Part 2 were the mid-season finale and second half of the second season. It was in the middle of the season is what I'm trying to say. It's not entirely clear what happened there. A lot of people have speculated that Fox aired some of the episodes out of order, which is not unlike Fox in general. I mean, Fox as a network has been known to do that on many an occasion. Christopher Titus's 3-season sitcom Titus had a lot of its episode famously aired out of order, with episodes referencing plot points that wouldn't actually be seen on screen until several episodes later in the season. So it's widely believed that Identity Part 2 were kind of meant to happen towards the end of the second season and not where they fell. Regardless, we're dealing with the aftermath of what happened with the Kalon, specifically Isaac's involvement. The crew has become pretty disillusioned with Isaac. Many of them regard him with cold indifference. At one point, we see him go into the mess hall and sit at a table, and everyone just kind of gets up and leaves. With a ship being upgraded and in space dock, as it's called in Star Trek right now, there's obviously some changing of the guard as far as new officers coming aboard. In the incident with the Kalon, several ships were destroyed, so any surviving crew members will obviously be reassigned to new ships. And one of those is personified by Ensign Charlie Burke, who was played by Ann Winters. Ensign Burke was aboard another ship who that ship was destroyed in the Kalon attack, which also resulted in her best friend being killed, who died trying to save Ensign Burke's life and making sure she could get away in the escape pod. Ensign Burke holds nothing but pure animosity towards Isaac and tells him as much to his face in the mess hall. We also find out that several regular crew members who we've known, including Gordon, aren't feeling super great about Isaac being on board the ship, and neither is Marcus, Dr. Finn's oldest son. You remember Dr. Finn was having a romantic relationship with Isaac throughout the second half of season 2, and Marcus and Ty, both of Dr. Finn's sons, had grown quite attached to Isaac, and now it's seeming like Marcus wants nothing to do with Isaac anymore. He's having nightmares about the attack. He's terrified of Isaac. He doesn't want Isaac around anymore. And a lot of this episode does deal heavily with people's relationships and feelings towards Isaac. We see his lab graffitied, and it gets to the point where I should probably throw this up there. Yeah, it's coming. But Isaac effectively commits suicide because he realizes that his presence on the ship is causing problems. It's causing a lack of morale. It's causing a lack of efficiency as he sees it. So he leaves what is essentially a suicide note, noting all the improvements that could be made on the ship and instructions on how to do them, and then ends it with, my best wishes to the Finn family, and triggers a directed EMP that fries his circuits and essentially kills him. And the latter part of the episode is people coming to terms with the Isaac's death and ultimately saving him. And there's a bit of a character arc there for Ensign Burke, who, through some special skills that she has that aren't fully explained or understood by this guy, she's able to help revive him, much to her own chagrin. There's A lot of great drama in this episode. We've seen it over the last three seasons of the last three of the three seasons of this show, that they've started to ebb further away from the flat out comedy. And a lot of that, I think, was because of how mismarketed the show was in season one. Season one of The Orville was marketed heavily by Fox as being essentially Family Guy in space. It was pushed hard under the Seth MacFarlane name. All the commercials had heavy focus on the jokes that would take place, and the writing even had a lot of humor in it. But it wasn't your typical Seth MacFarlane humor. It was a lot more subtle, a lot more just kind of sarcastic and silly. But in season two, they really leaned more into the dramatic side, or as I call it, the Star Trek side of things. Really kind of becoming their own version of Star Trek. And season three, at least for this first episode, there is very little humor in the episode. There's maybe one or two actual comedic moments or real jokes in the episode. The rest of the episode is pretty straightforward science fiction, which I think is interesting considering that these episodes are now considerably longer. When The Orville had to air on a network television channel, they were only really allotted 40 to 45 minutes of actual screen time. Now that it's on Hulu, this episode is over an hour long, not including any time for commercial breaks, just because it's Hulu. Those exist. I think the episode itself actually times out to about an hour and 10 minutes. And they've even said that the rest of the season is going to be like that, with some episodes being as much as 85 minutes long. That's almost an hour and a half, which I think is going to make for some really interesting storytelling, especially considering how much of a bigger budget they seem to have gotten for this season. The CGI and special effects are immensely noticeably better than they were on Fox. Not that they were bad when the show was on Fox, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it still looked like a TV show. Now the show looks far more cinematic. There's better lighting. The uniforms seem to fit better. There's a lot more detail to the different parts of the ship. Everything just seems to look a lot cleaner and neater and more just well put together, which I think is such a great show of faith that Hulu has in the show. I think a lot of folks were expecting this season to be a one and done. I don't think Hulu would put as much money into this season if they thought that it was just going to be a one and done season. They would have just kept them at the same budget, told them to get it over with and be done. I think that if this show does as well this season as they'd like it to, we could easily see more seasons from this, and I would love that. I am a lifelong Star Trek fan who honestly has been quite disillusioned with Star Trek in recent years. I don't subscribe to Paramount Plus. I have not watched Star Trek Discovery or Picard or Strange New Worlds. I've seen Lower Decks, and Lower Decks is funny for what it is, but it's basically Star Trek Rick and Morty. I have big problems with the way Paramount has handled Star Trek in recent years. The movies notwithstanding, I think the movies are fine actually with the three movies that came out, and Into Darkness is whatever. But I have no interest in paying money for Paramount Plus to watch these other Star Trek series, because I feel like Paramount has kind of lost touch with what Star Trek is supposed to be. Not that the shows might be bad. I don't know if they're bad, but just from what I've seen, they've kind of gotten away from what Star Trek always was, which was a smart and subtle take on social commentary set in a science fiction platform. Star Trek has always, or has never, shied away from taking shots at the socio-political landscape of the contemporary world, telling it through science fiction. And The Orville has picked that up even in its first season, where it was a lot more comedic. The first season dealt with things like gender identity and gender roles and relationships and xenophobia and things like that, and interracial relationships, all kinds of things like that. The Orville has never shied away from. The Orville, I dare say, has been far more Star Trek than Star Trek has been in recent years. And so I would love to see it if the Orville could continue to hold that, hold on to that and take this new direction with being a more dramatic show that still has some nice moments of comedy in it, but they're not the driving force in the program. Obviously, we need to talk about the fact that Norm Macdonald sadly passed away prior to the show being released from cancer. And Norm Macdonald provides the voice of the slimy, oozy creature on board known as Yaphet. And it was nice when he passed away that Seth MacFarlane said he had already finished recording all of his dialogue for the show. And the episode, before we see anything else on screen, we see a nice dedication to Norm Macdonald at the beginning. I think it was so lovely that they did that. And yeah, Yaphet's still there and he's still funny, but even Yaphet has some really great dramatic moments in the episode. It's really interesting to see that such a goofy idea of a character played by such a goofy comedian has had some great moments of acting. We've seen great moments of drama from Yaphet in the first two seasons. They're again really continuing with that into season 3. Now they're releasing the show in a weekly format, and I appreciate that because there's so much on right now. We're talking about it on this channel. We've got The Boys, we've got Stranger Things, we've got Obi-Wan Kenobi. There's so many things on right now. So having that week in between episodes is nice, but also there's longer episodes and a lot more to digest with this show, and I'm enjoying it. It's there's a lot of dark, heavy stuff on right now. Again, The Boys, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the Orville. While it's dramatic, it's very lighthearted. It's got a warmth to it, and it's almost a palate cleanser. So I'm enjoying it, and I'm glad it's here. I'm glad it's back, and I hope it continues strong. I hope this season continues to just really knock it out of the park like this first episode did, and I hope it continues to get more seasons. I hope this isn't the last season of the Orville, but if it is, I hope they end on a very strong note. Seth MacFarlane is a lifelong Star Trek fan, and it really is his love letter to Star Trek, and it's a love letter that I am loving reading right now. So if you haven't checked out the Orville yet, check out the first 2 seasons on Hulu and check out the first episode of the Orville New Horizons, available now. If you have watched it, let me know what you think down in the comments, or hit me up on Twitter, hit the show up on Twitter. All that stuff's down there at the bottom. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you guys again here with more from the Orville, all the other shows, all the trailer reactions here on Off the Wall. My name is Mike. See you guys next time. Bye.